Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. James Smith Jr., and welcome to another edition of the Dr. James Show and another edition of what is going to be, or what promises to be, another compelling episode. Just wanted to let you know that, as always, as we're going through the program, please feel free to put your thoughts in the chat room, your questions in the chat room. I have a feeling that you're going to have plenty today. And as a reminder, we are sponsored by the Pyramid Club of Philadelphia. Wow. As individuals, we, from time to time, compare our lives to other people's lives. Sometimes we think the grass is always greener on the other side, and we all know that the grass is greener where it's watered most. But today, wow, today life is relative. We say we have it hard. It's challenging, the pandemic. But do we really understand the blessing we have to be free and to live? Our guest today, Chalana McFarland, what a story. What a story. Rather than me bringing her out initially to share who she is, where she's from, what's been happening in her life, we're going to show you a brief clip, video clip, and let her tell you via the video clip. So let's take a look.
My name is Chalana McFarland. I'm 52 years old. I was raised in the small town of Valdosta, Georgia. I have one daughter who is a sophomore in college. I was an attorney in Atlanta prior to my incarceration. And in 2005, I was convicted of mortgage fraud, and I was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison as a first-time nonviolent offender.
Wow. Can't wait to peel back that onion. Ladies and gentlemen, let's meet Chalana McFarland. Chalana, welcome to the Dr. James Show. Welcome. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me today.
No problem. Yes, I'm gonna go deeper and ask you again. How are you, considering everything you experienced, considering the last year right now at home? How are you?
I am extremely grateful and blessed and excited about life and being with my family, and I'm treasuring every moment of it.
Speaking of treasuring, take us back to June the 9th, 2020. What was that like? What was that day like?
June 9th was and is still surreal for those that are listening. I was informed in the first week of April that because of my medical conditions, I had 4 conditions that were listed as CDC factors for having a bad to terminal outcome if I were to contract COVID. So the federal prison system decided that if people met certain criteria, meaning they had served 50% of their time, they had a good institutional record, they weren't a threat or to public safety, that they could be transferred to home confinement because there is no ability to social distance in prison.
Right.
So I was called to the office and told that your name's on the list of people that are going to be considered for release. Well, I had served 15 years of a 30-year sentence. And I'd heard many times before, oh, this legislation is happening, or they're going to do this, or parole is coming back. Because for those people that don't know, there is no parole in the federal system. So if you're giving a sentence, you're going to serve 85% of that sentence, and then you can earn good time for the other 15%. But my release date was not going to be until 2031. So they called me in and I said, okay, well, thank you for telling me. And I went back and people were on the phones calling their families and stuff. And I decided to wait because my family they've been on the roller coaster with me so many times as we appealed my case, as we filed different things in court, each new attorney, each new retainer paid, there
Sure.
was hope that came with it. And then at the end of the day, nothing happened. So I didn't want them to go through that with me. So I
And
waited. And then they had me.
how did you feel during that time? Were you optimistic? Were you pessimistic? Were you, let's just see what happens?
I just took a wait and see posture initially, a little skeptical because they didn't have any information. It was like, I was like, okay, well, if it happens, it happens. But I went to my room and I prayed. And, and I said, Lord, if this is real, if this is you, then I know this is going to happen. So please, just order my steps or whatever I'm supposed to do. And maybe about a week later, I got called in and they actually had paperwork and they said, okay, Ms. McFarland, sign here. We're going to process you. It has to go through all these different layers of bureaucracy. And then we'll let you know. So I signed, and you need anything else? And what else could I need? And they said, well, we'll need a release residence for you. They'll have to have a home phone. They'll have to do this, that, and the other. So at that point, I got on the phone and called my family and said, hey, listen, I just signed some papers. I think this is real. So I need you all to be praying and fasting about this. And,
Sure.
we'll see. So this was in April. Mid-May, some people started to go home, but I was in the first group that signed. But nobody called me. So I'm like, well, maybe they think I have too much time left and they're not going to, that doubt starts to creep in. And I just started rebuking it. And I said, you know what, God, I put this in your hands and I'm not going to pick it back up now. So I know you got it. So I'm going to ride with whatever you say. If you mean for me to stay here, then I'll stay. And if you mean for me to go, then I'm going to run out of here.
And do the happy dance while you're running, right?
Right. And then my best friend, she had also signed the same day that I did, and she got her date of May 26th. And she had already done 12 years. And so we were jumping around and screaming and yelling and crying. And I was so excited for her. And people said to me, I don't understand how you could be so happy when you don't have your date yet. And I said, me not having a date has nothing to do with me being able to be happy for her.
Right.
She's going home to her kids. And they just looked at me and they didn't understand. Yeah, but I would be mad because, you've done longer. And I said, sweetheart, favor is not fair. Favor is on her life right now. I said, mine is coming.
Right.
And so we celebrated for her. And then we started, when you accumulate a lot of things and then you start giving things away.
Yeah.
And you go from there. And then she was giving everything away. And then she finally came the day before she left and she said, I don't want to leave you here. And I said, you just got to go ahead. It's all right. But 2 days before she left, I got my date and I was leaving on June the 9th. So that morning I was up early. I, had my box packed, I was ready. I didn't have to be there until 8:30. I think I was ready at like 6:15.
and you're getting ready. What role did Sepharia Johnson play in your life in getting ready?
Oh, Sepharia. Okay, Sepharia.
I'm sorry, Sepharia. Ooh,
She just come in to the system, and I don't know, I just took her under my wing. But anyway, she carried my boxes down for me that day. And she was 36 and she had 2 little boys who her aunt would bring her little boys. They would trail my parents down sometimes. And we would all sit together at visitation. And so I knew her sons. And so I told her, I said, when I go get settled, I'll try to see your boys. And she carried my box down for me. And I told her, I said, well, I'll see you when you get home, because she had a 6-year sentence for tax fraud. And it was just, it was hard to leave her, but, I told her it's okay. I'll see you soon.
Sure.
I didn't know that would be the last time I would see her, but we'll cover that in a little bit. But she, I hugged everybody and I went through the door into receiving and discharge. And you have to do all this paperwork, and they have to fingerprint you and do a lot of different things. And the entire time I'm thinking, okay, is this real? Is this real?
Exactly.
Are they going to come and tell me uh, there was a mistake, you're not going to be able to leave? Because that had happened like a week or so before. The girl was actually in the car with her family, and they went out and got her and told her there was a mistake in the paperwork and she had to come back in. So I was just like, and I was just praying the entire time. And so I remember the camp administrator, he looked at me, he says, "Did you say something?" I said, "No, I wasn't talking to you." And he says, "Well, there's nobody else here." And I said, "I know, I'm talking to God. He's always here." And he
Wow.
just kind of looked at me funny, but hey, I get by how I get by, and that's how I get by. And so my counselor came down and he said, "What kind of car is your family driving?" And I said, "They'll be in a gray Honda Accord." And he looks, he says, "Oh, I see it out there." And my
Wow.
heart just
Wow.
dropped.
Wow.
And I said, "This is real."
It's
And
real.
they finally said, "Okay, McFarland, you're done. You can head out." And my counselor grabbed my box to carry it for me. And he walked out first, and I walked out behind him. And then my daughter was standing there, and we just took off running, and we
Wow.
just hugged each other. And because she was only 4 years old when I left, and now she's 20. And that was like one of the most amazing days of my life. And then I saw my parents standing there, and they were crying. And my dad is not an emotional person, but he had tears in his eyes that day, and we
Tears
all
of
just
joy.
hugged. And
Tears
then I
of
turned
joy.
to wave goodbye to all of the sisters that I made that kept me during my 15 years of incarceration. And it was bittersweet because you know, you're glad to go, but it hurts that you're leaving so many good people behind.
I think you
And
call it
so,
survivor remorse, right?
right, it's survivor's remorse, because I made it out and so many others, even those with medical conditions, did not, including my friend Saphiria, who in August died at the age of 36 from COVID because they didn't process her paperwork in time. And that was a hard blow. And I've lost two other friends that were there with me to COVID that should have been processed out, that met all the criteria, but the wheels of the bureaucracy of the Bureau of Prisons turned very slow.
Wow. Well, here's the $1 million question I'm sure folks want to know. What happened? What happened? Can you share that story with us? How did you wind up incarcerated for 15 years of a 30-year sentence?
I had a closing practice I started it in 1999. Prior to that, I practiced criminal law, criminal defense law. And when I became pregnant with my daughter, it was too hard on my body. So someone said, "Well, you need to look at transactional work." And so I decided, well, okay, I don't know what that is exactly, but I just graduated from law school in 96. So I'm still very new, very green. I'm very enthusiastic as I am about all things that I go after in life. And so I had a friend who was a paralegal who worked for a closing firm, and she said, "You know what, hire me and I'll come show you how to do everything and we'll figure it out." So that's what we did. And long story short, I closed loans that were called flips, where the properties are being bought and sold in the same day or in a very short period of time. The loans were table funded, which means that there's a company that is the bank, and
Right.
they write the check at closing, and then they in turn do an assignment. And what they would do at that point was to bundle these loans into these packages that ended up being part of the mortgage crash that happened in 2007, where you heard all about the subprime mortgages and the bundling and all of that.
Sure.
There were some issues regarding the appraisals where the properties were overinflated. There's some issues with the way that people qualify for the loans, but all of that had nothing to do with me or my office. As far as my office went, all the loans were paid off. There wasn't any money missing or anything like that. But some of the people in my office, they were involved in the fraud, in that they were altering documents and different things, and I didn't know. And ultimately, when I went to trial, they testified. One of them said, well, we didn't tell Chalana because we didn't want Chalana to know, because she wouldn't have gone along with it. And but I take responsibility for it, because they were my employees, and I should have kept a closer look, or I should have learned more about the industry before I just jumped in. But you don't know. They call it the practice of law for a reason. And
Right.
that's because law school teaches you theory, but it teaches you absolutely nothing about how to run a practice. And I made mistakes, but did I deliberately sit down and conspire to defraud HUD or any of the government agencies? No. And when I was ultimately indicted, which was in 2004, I was just flabbergasted. I mean, here
Mm,
is a person that
mm.
never had detention, never had a speeding ticket, and now I'm looking at this indictment that says the United States of America versus me.
Wow.
And I remember looking at it and turning to my mom and saying, Mama, the whole country.
Mm, mm.
And that was so sobering. And when I read through it, all the things that I was accused of, I was just still I look at it and I'm amazed at the things that they accused me of. And they started calling me the queen of mortgage fraud, which
Wow.
was a tremendous moniker when I just graduated from law school in 1996. So I ascended to the throne pretty quickly. But what I was a victim of a mortgage fraud ring, because they preyed upon young attorneys, and
Mm.
they all knew each other before they came to my office. And then after my office was closed, they went to another attorney and did the same thing. So this was a pattern, but that didn't fit into the government's narrative, because here I am, young, up and coming attorney, well known in the community. I made better headlines.
Mm, mm.
And that is what happened. They turned my case. It was a complete circus.
It made a
And
lot of headlines. I do my research. I saw a lot of the information. Shalane, before I ask you the next question, because I want to go deeper with this, there is a question in the chat room. It says, what would you say to those who are facing major challenges with seemingly no light coming soon? So again, what would you say to those who are facing major challenges with seemingly no light coming soon? Any advice?
I would tell them to keep staring straight ahead, that the light will eventually come. And if your eyes are closed, you won't see it. So you have to figure out a way to get through it. And what I find, the easiest way to do it is to get over yourself, because no matter
Mm,
how bad things are in your life, there's always someone that's doing worse. And if you dedicate your time and effort to positive things, to bettering yourself, to helping others, you'll be able to see the light, and it will come. And the thing about it is that we tend to be destination driven, instead of understanding that your quality of life is as you are. It's your state of mind at this moment.
yeah.
And it's not something that's going to happen. It is what it is. And so you have to make that choice, that, like I did when I was inside, God, I don't believe you want me to be miserable. And I
Mm,
don't believe you want me to suffer. And you set me aside for a reason. And so I'm going to figure out what that reason is while I'm here. And in the meantime, I'm going to try to be your light to other people. And people used to say, I don't understand how you could have so much peace about yourself, and you got this long sentence and you might actually die in here. And I said, well, you know what? First of all, my salvation is assured. And
mm,
I know that if I die, I know where I'm going. And in the meantime, I'm just going to keep living. And what's going on with you? You know, why are you so
right,
angry?
right,
Who
right.
made you mad today? Well, let's go fix it. Let's just try to find out what's going on. And, you know, I found out from a lot of the girls, you know, they have a lot of hurt, and, you know, people don't allow themselves to heal. And so each of us has our own journey, but I would just tell people facing major challenges is that you just have to keep looking forward. And sometimes you don't know what the next week is going to bring, the next day. And, there are times that you have to break it down to, okay, I just got to get through this next hour, or I just got to get through this next minute, because it can weigh on you.
Chalana, was that always your MO, or is that something you developed while you were incarcerated?
No, that was not always my MO. Prior to my incarceration, I was caught up like everyone else in what people call the rat race, or trying to keep up with the Joneses, and living other people's expectations of what my life should be. And that is a hard, uh, those are hard shoes to fill, because they're not yours. And so you have to learn what it is that you want for yourself, because each of us has a mission, each of us has a purpose for being here. And you just have to find out what that is. And when you do, I promise you, your life will become so amazing.
Take us back to that moment when you knew that this was real, that your life was about to be different for the foreseeable future. Do you remember that feeling? Do you remember walking away to your new home? I mean, I wouldn't even call it a home, but walking away, you were not going to be practicing anymore, that life was going to be different.
I think going into my trial, I was delusional, honestly. I look at it, and everything was it was almost like it was hazy. I was going through the motions, but I wasn't functioning. And at that point, I was had been given medication by a doctor to help me with my nerves and my depression. And all it did was just numb me. And I went through, and I was going through the motions, and it didn't help. I was still hurting, and I was still afraid, and I was scared, and then the people that were my friends, and even some family members, and my husband, you expect support from them, and you just don't get it. What you get is, I can't believe this happened, or you should have known better. And none of that helps. I mean, it is what it is. We're here now. I need some support. What are we going to do moving forward? Right. And as I went through the trial, it was horrible. My attorney was very inexperienced and new and inept, and he did a very bad job. He's not a bad man, and I'll say that. He's a very kind man, and he tried, but he just did not have the skills that were needed. And we're battling the government, and they have a whole table of people and paralegals and all these others, and it's just me and him and a friend of mine that came along to help. And it was overwhelming. And then on the day that the jury came back, I still was hoping, because I prayed and I fasted,
Sure.
And I was like, God, I read every scripture about deliverance that, 10 times a day. And I got, on every prayer list, had family members calling their churches asking for prayer for me. And I wanted God to deliver me out of the situation. But what I discovered is that sometimes God won't take you out of a situation. He'll take you through a situation. And it's a growth period, and it's uncomfortable, and it's painful, and it hurts. But you come out the better person, and your scars are beautiful at the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that day, when the jury came back and they say, we find you guilty, and I just was stunned. And I heard my mother cry out in the courtroom, and I heard tears and crying and wailing. And my knees just gave out and I sat down, only to be pulled right back up by the marshals, who turned me around and put handcuffs on me. And I looked at my lawyer and I said, wait, I gotta go now. And he said, yeah, the judge decided that he's not gonna let you self-surrender. Even though for nearly a year I had been out on pretrial release, living in another state. I made every hearing, every status call. I, was compliant with the probation officer that was monitoring me. But for this particular reason, because I had vacationed out of the country on numerous occasions, they felt that I was a flight risk, although I had already surrendered my passport. But so they took me into custody, and that was the hardest thing. That was on February the 15th, and the day after Valentine's.
Chalana, why was your sentence so severe? 30 years.
The judge said that he wanted to make an example of me to deter other attorneys from committing fraud.
Right.
And so he threw the book, the shelf, the case,
everything,
all of it at me. Yeah.
So
and I actually,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I actually didn't get sentenced that day. It's not like on TV. So that day they handcuffed me. They took me out to a little room off to the side. And by this point, I didn't cry until I got past the door. And then when I got there and I saw this little jail cell, I just broke all the way down. And then I looked, and there's two guys sitting in the jail cell that I guess were waiting for court or had finished court. And I'm crying and my nose is running. And it was not a pretty picture at all. And my hands are cuffed behind my back. And I can't blow my nose. And I asked the marshal, I was like, could you uncuff me? I need to blow my nose. And he looked at me and said, no, suck it up. And if I knew who this guy was, I would find him to tell him thank you. But whoever this gentleman was that was in the cell, in his prison clothes, he told me, he said, sister, I got you. And he put his hand through the bars with tissue and blew my nose for me. And it was not pretty. And he wiped my face for me. And then the other one went and wet a little tissue, and they came and they patted my little face down. And then they were just telling me, hey, it's okay. You can do this. Just suck it up. It's going to be okay. They just gave me words of encouragement, which I didn't understand at that time. But later on, when I got to reflect on it, I knew that God placed them there.
Yeah.
And to perform such a humble act for somebody that was in such desperate need, that's when I realized even when you're at your lowest, there will always be someone there to help you.
Powerful, powerful. Chalana, before we move into what was mothering like being away, I want to show a brief clip that highlights you, Nia, and what that was like.
For 52-year-old Chalana McFarland, the wounds from missing her daughter Nia Cosby are still fresh.
It hurts even to this day that I wasn't able to be with her.
In 2005, McFarland, then an attorney, was convicted of mortgage fraud and sentenced to 30 years in prison. Cosby went to live with her grandparents. She was 4 years old.
When she'd cry on the phone and say, Mommy, I want to see you, my heart would just break. And there are a lot of ladies that decide that they just rather not have the visit because it's just too hard.
What did you decide?
I wanted every visit that I could have because I have a 30-year sentence. And I can recall my daughter, when she got a little bit older, she may have been about 6, and she went up to the officer and she says, can we take my mommy to McDonald's for just a little while? I promise we'll bring her right back. And the officer just told her, no, sweetheart, we can't let her go right now.
Cosby, too, has vivid memories of those visits.
Whenever you go to visit, you're not allowed to lay on them, snuggle them, cuddle them. You're allowed to hug and hold hands across the table. That's about it.
She's now 20 years old, a college sophomore studying finance, and still struggles with the moments her mother missed.
I did dance, I played basketball, I did choir for many, many years, and I always wanted my mom to be able to see me do those things. I did want her to be a part of those things.
But last summer, an
Wow, wow, wow. And you can't get back lost time. So what was that like for you, mothering from a distance? And what is it like now with Nia right there?
Well, even though I was away, I was still mama.
Mm,
So I wrote her constantly. I called constantly. I was very active with, her school. I got all of her report cards. I would get her homework. When she would get out of line, I would check that. And, so I was still mama. And
right.
we have a wonderful relationship now.
Mhm.
We actually last month we spent an entire weekend together, just she and I, and it was amazing because we have so many similarities to not have been together. And I was able to share with her like a lot of stories and things about when she was little that she didn't really remember, or
Yeah.
fill in the dots about things. And uh but we have a good relationship. I think I'm as good in as good a standing with her as any parent can be with a millennial
Mm,
child.
mm.
So
How long was that embrace when you held her for the first time after you were released?
I I don't even know. It seemed like it lasted an eternity. We just cried. We cried, and then she drove. So when I left, she was driving her Barbie car, and now she's driving the Honda, and she's singing and dancing, and I'm like, don't you need to keep both hands on the wheel?
A
And
mother, a mother, a mother.
right, and she's like, Ma, I got it, I got it. And but she's just really an amazing person.
Mm,
I was blessed that my parents raised her, so I knew exactly the type of upbringing that she was receiving. I knew the home that she was being raised in. I knew the people that she was being around. And for that, I'm really blessed because I served time with a lot of women who didn't even know where their kids were,
mm.
or their kids were being abused or molested, and there wasn't anything they could do about it. And so I am just so thankful that I didn't have to experience any of that. And my daughter, it wasn't always smooth. We had some issues sometimes when she came to
Yeah.
see me, and with the guards and different things, and them being disrespected. But it's just something that as a family you pull through.
And you guys pull through in a significant way. This is so compelling. Before I go on, there's another question in the chat room. It says, what an awesome story. Overcoming obstacles and not relishing in your past mistakes. Thank you for that comment. The question, Chalana, is what is it about you that made you not quit and stop fighting for your life at any time while facing this painful experience? So what is it about you? How are you wired and said, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to stop fighting during this time?
It's not like I made some, heroic decision to just decide that I'm going to, oh, here's this obstacle and I'm just going to overcome it. No, I mean, it's as simple as when they took me into county jail that first night, and I went to sleep, and I was just determined that I'm just not getting up. I'm not getting up. I'm just not. And then eventually I got hungry and I got up. So you can blame it on my stomach. Um, it's fine to grieve. It's fine to have periods where you're down, but you just can't stay there. I mean, life with me now is not perfect. It's not all rainbows and unicorns and sunshine every day. I have difficult times. I have people that are mean to me, that say horrible things. Social media is brutal, by the way.
Yes,
And
it
then I thought
is.
about it and I said, you know what, if I don't read these stupid comments, then I won't
Mhm,
get upset. And
mhm.
so I just, take it on the chin and keep moving. But, people are resilient. And so you just have to realize that, you know, you may fall, but you can bounce and get back on.
Hashtag bounce back. Selena, Shalana, when you were away, was there a routine or regimen? Was it a typical day, or was every day different? And how did that experience play a role in what you're doing now? Because I want to move into talking about what you're doing now, because you're doing phenomenal things.
Well, prison is structured. They tell you what time to get up, what to wear, how to make your bed, how to keep things in your cubicle. You don't have a lot of decisions that you get to make. It's designed to bring you in line with what they consider to be mainstream views. And
Right.
so every day was the same in some ways, and every day was different because people make things different.
Mm,
And you learn to appreciate and experience people from all different types of diverse backgrounds and upbringings, and you learn tolerance, you learn patience. And I people wouldn't understand if I say that prison wasn't a bad experience for me,
mm,
but
mm.
any experience is what you make out of it. And so I took some classes, I taught a lot of classes, and I participated in a lot of different activities. We did a lot of the women when I was at Tallahassee. We raised like almost $5,000 for the breast cancer
Wow.
organization, which I won't name.
Mhm.
And we did this by donating money that we earned. And mind you, a lot of the women only make 12 cents an hour. So if they were to donate
Wow.
$5, that really is significant. But we had 1,200 women there, and we raised almost $5,000, and the organization wouldn't even come pick up the check, you know, because,
Wow.
and so, but it didn't stop the fact that we gave from our hearts. We did angel tree toy drives. We did, you know, lots of things, because the thing about it is that redemption comes from getting outside of yourself and your own personal
Mm,
struggles.
mm, mm. So you were busy,
Yes.
and it was preparing you for what you're doing today. There's a comment in the chat room that says, "Thank goodness for having a strong support system. As the saying goes, it takes a village." So you had the village on the outside. You were creating a village while you were away, a village that went out of their way to provide and to give. What does today look like for you? What's happening? From what I understand, you're working on a book. You're being an advocate with regard to criminal reform. Talk to us about what's happening today.
Well, I'm writing a book. It's going to be called Collateral Consequences, and it's going to
Mm,
talk about my prison journey and the things that I experienced within the system that I think people need to know. There's a fascination in America now about criminal justice, and people see shows like The Orange is the New Black, and
yeah.
you know there's some truth to it, but there's also a very dark and sobering side to the criminal justice system, and that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about how your tax dollars are being wasted. Uh, you have people that, you know, prison is a waste of time. You have people that work maybe 4 days, 4 hours a day, and they sleep the rest of the time. You have the only educational programs really are once you get your GD, there's really nothing else for you to do. You can't go to college in the federal system unless your family can afford to pay tuition. Uh, you can work, you can earn a trade, but the certifications aren't real ones in many
Mhm.
cases. So you can get the experience, but you're not going to get an actual vocational trade certification these days. And so it's pointless. It's like you're taking care of grown people. We sit around, we play cards and games all day, we do puzzles, we watch probably more TV than any of you all in the real world.
Right.
And why? When we could be home raising our children, working, and gaining skills that can actually make us a better person. So one of the things that, I've dedicated myself to is doing advocacy work where I try to make conditions better for the women inside and bring as many
Mm.
home as possible.
How challenging is it right now in the midst of writing that book and reliving some of the things you're talking about right now? I can only imagine that you don't
Um, it's
marinate or
actually,
don't flashback or
no, actually it's therapeutic in a lot of ways, because when you're going through a situation, you have a different perspective than when you look back at it later. And so as I'm writing, it's actually a healing process for me in many ways.
do you find yourself now in situations like this where you are doing more speaking and talking and as you're doing your advocacy or as you move toward being a speaker?
Yes, I talk about criminal justice reform and advocacy anywhere. If we're in the grocery store and I get stuck in line and I could figure out some kind of way to tell you about it. It's just about about bringing awareness to people that the face of the quote unquote inmate or judicial impacted, or all these great terms that they have for us now, returning citizens and all of these different, we don't care what you call us, we just want to come home. And
Right.
so there are a lot of people that are making policy in relation to criminal justice reform that have good hearts and good intent, but they've never asked us what we need. They've never spent time in prison. So they don't know that, yes, you have all these beautiful things on paper with a big red bow on it, and it's not effective. And so I get to be that person that talks to them
Mm,
about, hey, this is really what we need. This is how
sure,
this needs to go
sure.
practically.
Now, you were granted clemency, and one of the reasons why you were released was because of your health. Uh, Tell us about others who might have to go back because of a bill not being signed.
Okay. So I was released under the CARES Act, COVID release, which means that if you have medical conditions or if you're elderly and you've done a significant portion of your time, then they will transfer you to home confinement. And while you're on home confinement, you wear an ankle monitor and you are under the purview of either probation or the halfway house. And they monitor you. So when I first came home, I had to check in several times a day. I could go anywhere. I was on home confinement, which was fine because it's in the age of COVID, no one was going anywhere.
Right.
So while everyone else was complaining about being stuck in the house, I'm happy to be home. So, and then
Perspective, yeah.
yes, absolutely. And then in January, on President Trump's last day in office, he granted me executive clemency, which means that that terminated my sentence. So my sentence is over. So I had served almost a year on, 6 months on home confinement. And so that would have put me at year 16. February would have been the 16th year, and I got clemency on the 21st of January. And that ended that portion.
Right.
However, I still have 5 years probation. I still have to answer to my probation officer. I still have to pay $11 million in restitution, which has now snowballed to 15 million, I think it is, due to interest. And as a result, it's considered a judgment against me. So I can't buy a home. I can't really have any assets because they'll levy them.
Mm,
So my sentence in some ways is over, and in some ways it's still continuing. And that is something else that I'm advocating about, which are the collateral consequences of your sentence. It's not enough that I have to say that I'm a felon for the rest of my life, but I also now have to pay money that I didn't take, um, that I'll never be able to pay off in my lifetime.
wow, wow. And you said that there's a possibility, unless this bill is signed, that others might have to go back to
Right.
prison once the pandemic or once the situation is resolved, is over?
The Trump administration issued a memo that said that once the pandemic was over, that those on home confinement would be returned to prison. So I would have been one of those people because I had 11 years left on my sentence. And it's horrible because just imagine you come home with your family, you've bonded again with your children, you've gotten a job, you're working, you're doing everything that you're supposed to do. And then one day with the stroke of a pen, they say that the pandemic's over and now you have to go turn yourself back in. It's pointless. It makes no sense. It's cruel and unusual punishment. And there are a lot of advocacy organizations that are lobbying the Biden administration at this point to reverse this memo. And it can be done with the stroke of a pen.
Stroke of a pen. You are getting some love in this chat room. Let's read this one. It says, "You don't seem to be bitter or playing a victim. How have you managed to seemingly have a very healthy mindset?" No
prayer.
No victim vocabulary here. You said prayer.
Prayer. Prayer changes things.
It certainly does. Someone else said, "Thank you for sharing your story. Your resilience is God's grace."
Yes, absolutely.
Someone
His
else
grace
said,
and mercy. It's nothing that I've done. It's nothing that I deserve. But I am just so grateful.
when people see me and say, "Hey, how you doing?" I always say, "I woke up." I woke up. Anything else is, unmatchable to that. We take that for granted. And they say you don't miss your water until your well runs dry. So I guess when you don't have that well, the miss is taken. You realize what you don't have. You certainly realize it. Key thought here says, person said, "I will remember as I serve on boards, ask those involved what they want, what they really need, what they really want." So Shalane, as we think about tomorrow, next week, next year, because what a difference a year makes, what are your thoughts? What's on your vision board with regard to your daughter, your life, your speaking, your book? I hope there's going to be a movie. Well, what's on your vision board for what's next?
Well, one of the things that I'm most looking forward to is attending one of my daughter's graduations for the first time. So I missed kindergarten, I missed 8th grade, I missed high school, and but I will not under any circumstances miss college. And they can make that little speech all they want to about don't cheer until everybody comes across the stage, but I'm gonna be that one that will be yelling.
You're gonna be loud. You're gonna be loud.
I'm gonna be loud. I'm looking forward to that. I am I'm open. I don't know. What I do is each morning I will wake up and as I pray and meditate, I ask God to order my steps. And so I pray that this year will just be a year of me continuing to listen to the call that He has on my life. A year of serving, because I found that I'm happiest when I'm serving. It's not about me. It's not about material possessions. It's not about acquisitions. It's just about showing God's love and his being a living example of mercy and of how you can fail at things in your life and still come back. So I don't know. I'm just receptive.
Wide open. How long did it take for you to find your rhythm when you came back home?
Oh my goodness.
Was there a
Have I
time
found it?
I mean, so much had changed. 15 years.
I am so technology challenged. It is unbelievable. I text my daughter constantly, "Hey, how do you do this?" Or YouTube is my best friend.
YouTube University.
YouTube and Google, everything. I borrowed a friend's truck to move some items out of storage, and I wanted to fill the gas tank up. And I sat there for the longest, searching all around for the lever for the
Yes,
gas cap.
yes.
And finally I said YouTube. So I go and and it turns out it doesn't even have a lever. You just go push it and it pops open. But it's like technology over a 16-year gap it's like being on Mars. And that is one of the major failings of the prison system, in that people in prison are still typing letters on typewriters. Uh, you we listen to music on MP3 players, and we thought that was something, phenomenal. Some state facilities have iPads and things like that, but the federal system does not. And it's a disservice, because when you leave out, you go to resume classes, they give you paper resumes that have been typed, and you have your 2 little copies of resumes, and you've taken all these classes on how to fill out applications, and then you get there and they tell you you have to upload your resume, and you're like, what do you talk upload what? How do you do that? What if I can't afford a laptop? What if I can't afford a smartphone? What happens then? And it is like really being on another planet sometimes. And the other thing that was the strangest thing to me was people talking to themselves all the time, or at least that's what I perceived it to be, until I realized they have the earbuds in.
Yes, impact, yeah.
But it was just weird, because I'm in the grocery store and this guy's like, yeah, something about tomatoes, and I'm like, what? And he's like, what? I'm not talking to you. And I said, well, you said the thing about the tomatoes. And that's when he says, I'm on the phone. And I said, oh, okay. Or how people are at dinner or, out with their families, and everybody's on their phone. Nobody's talking. And that's strange to me. And so, when my daughter comes, we have a no phone rule. We put them down. We will go check them. But, you have to communicate. It's important. And so that is the biggest thing, how people are so caught up in social media that they fail to, really work on their humanity.
Yeah. And we take it for granted. Chalana, were the people who played a role in your going away, were they ever brought to justice?
Yes, they all, there were, nearly all of us went to prison. They went for a lot less than I did. Most of them went for anywhere from a few months to, I think the next highest was 7 years. And they were far more culpable than I was, but they struck deals with the government and they testified against me at my trial. So they got further reductions. And I have not run into any of them yet. In my heart of hearts, I know I've forgiven them for the lies that they told and the harm that they caused. But I don't exactly know how my flesh is going to react the first time I run into one of them. So, I mean, I'm not going to do like on Ratchet TV and fight or anything, but I just don't know how I'll feel about that. So that, that's just something. Yeah.
Another comment came in. Actually, it's a question. Did you regain your personal key relationships, families, friends, etc., to continue to have that support system that you have?
Well, I don't know that I regained them. I don't think I ever lost them. My key support people stayed with me, because one of the things is that people in prison, you have a lot of time, and you have time to write your family members and your friends, and it's not all about them catering to you. You have to reach out to them because they're far more busy than you are. And so I was one of those people. If it was your birthday, your anniversary, you were going to get a card from me. It was probably going to be a handmade card because I took card making. And
so
actually, when I went to visit,
Hallmark, huh?
when I went to some friends that I've seen since I've been out, they actually have their little cards still. They pulled them out and showed me. I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, it's a two-way street. And so people think for that when you go to prison that you're cut off from everyone. No, you're only cut off if you choose to be cut off. And so I maintain those relationships as much as I could. And since I've been home, I've been able to FaceTime and visit a few people. And
Look at you, FaceTime. Okay, you got that technology going now.
yeah,
Chalana, I'm going to take you to the part of the show that we usually save toward the end. We call it the mini, M-I-N-I, the mini keynote. Since I'm a speaker, I speak for a living, I'm always giving presentations at conferences and organizations. So for the people who come on, I give them an opportunity to make a 30-second keynote address where they look right at the camera and words of encouragement, words of wisdom, empowerment, you sharing your truth, calls to action is your call. And I know you are working on being a speaker. So here's an opportunity to do what could be your first keynote. I don't know, but look at that camera from the heart, 30 seconds, talk to the audience, give them some words to consider, words to think about.
okay. I think I want to direct this towards the children of incarcerated parents. I would say to anyone that's viewing this program today, get involved. The kids don't understand in a lot of ways what's going on. The grandparents can be overwhelmed. If we all come together as a village, like someone said in the chat, we can raise these kids and they will not be lost souls, because the pipeline to prison is very real. By taking fathers out of the home, by taking the mothers away, you have orphans. And so I think as a community, it's very important for us to get involved. And you may say, well, I don't know anyone whose child is, or whose parent is locked up. Well, find them. There are organizations, there are groups, there are churches. Donate if you have children that have clothes and they're too small, they've just decided they want another style. There is probably some child that is dying for some clothes. So when we look at that, I think it's important that we don't forget about the children, because when a judge sentences a mother in particular, he sentences those children too. And even if you were to help donate money to help a family be able to go visit the mother, a couple of $100. So instead of maybe buying that new pair of shoes or that new purse, or green fees if you're a golfer, if you donated that money to a family so that they could be able to have gas and sandwiches for that day to be able to go visit their incarcerated person, because it does cost. I think that would be a beautiful thing.
A beautiful thing. Chalana, wow, your blessing. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story in such a profound way. Thank you for not being a victim, being a victor. Thank you for the words, the examples, the stories you shared. This hour flew by. So thank you very much. For those of you who are watching, think about some of the thoughts that Chalana shared. I mean, we in this pandemic talking about we can't wait till we get out. And Chalana says, I'm glad to be home. Think about the many things we take for granted. Breathing, walking, talking, the roof over our head, the water that comes through our pipes. Where's your focus? On what you have or on what you don't have? I say all the time, what you focus on grows. And Chalana has shared with us today that she's focusing on living out loud, making every moment and every minute matter. What a story. Again, thank you for joining in. We'll see you again next week. And like I always say, you've just been Gym-Pacted.